A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwatim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here, and Lord's will as always with an edifying lesson. And today's lesson is titled Israeli Settlers Uproot Approximately 200 Olive Trees in the South Hebron Hills. Let me just move this over real quick. Just forgive the noise, it's just my laptop. Right, so here it says Palestinian farmers targeted as settler violence escalates across the occupied West Bank. So it's dated as of today. I just wanted to read through it, and Lord's will as always, this lesson would be edifying. Here it says that the Watan Israeli settlers uprooted approximately 200 olive trees on Monday in the Palestinian area of Sefer Yatta, located in the southern part of the occupied West Bank. It says farmer Mohammed Makhamra from the town of Susia in Sefer Yatta said that a group of settlers destroyed and they uprooted and around 200 olive trees that were 8 years old. He said, I rely entirely on agriculture. For years, I have been subjected to settler assaults, including physical attacks and the uprooting of trees, he said. He added, the settlers claim to strip the land and leave it and barren to facilitate its confiscation under the pretext that it is unused. No matter what happens, we will replant and remain on our land, and we will not abandon it to the settlers, he affirmed, right? So, I was just reading this recently, but it's funny that he claims to that land doesn't actually belong to them either, right? That land actually belongs to the real people of the scriptures, the real people of the Bible, right? They began to occupy the so-called Holy Land, and they went in there approximately around in the 6th century, right? And but that's beside the point. The point really is that the treatment of the land, the trees, right, and also the destructive nature of Esau, right, because he is the type of person that would do some folly, like this, right? And the irony is he's masquerading himself to be like the people, but when you look at his works, when you look at his fruits, when you look at his deeds, the scriptures say a tree is known by their fruits. When you look at that, it doesn't match up. They portray themselves to be what's that scripture that says they portray themselves to be essentially be Satan has transformed himself into an angel of light, to roughly paraphrase. This is the way that Esau operates. He portrays himself to be somebody who is essentially virtuous, somebody who has character, morals, and uprightness. But look at your actions. Your actions show the complete otherwise. Your actions show that as the scriptures say, the soul that is within you is not upright. It's not upright for him to do certain things, right? To execute examples of righteousness. He's a backwards mechanic, right? As a matter of fact, I'll just start off here, and I'll get some information on the trees. And it says, this is Revelation chapter 6, verse 4. And it says, and it went out another horse that was red, and a power was given unto him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and they that should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. So Esau was blessed with the sword to be able to perform the destructive actions, nature, behaviors, not just upon people, but upon the planet Earth also. A very good example of this, if you go to, when you go into the history of modern day Nigeria, when you go into that, the history of that company, Shell, the gas company, when you look at like before and after, before they came in, because the Israelites, that they essentially were depending on the resources that Shell contaminated. So essentially, Shell, the gas company, they began to exploit not just the people but the land itself, and they contaminated the land to the point where, if you look at, I believe it's the Delta region, if I'm not mistaken. If you look at the region there today, that region, it's not, you can't use the water that is running from that land anymore. It's very carcinogenic, it's dangerous, it's harmful, and that's the type of person Esau is. You go into the land, strip the land of its natural resources, contaminate the natural resources, right? And to the point where you can't even use it. You can't essentially live off the land like you used to, right? So here in this situation, so-called Palestinians, they were reusing the olive trees. Let me go back to it. Hold on. Let me just find it real quick. They were using essentially the olive trees. And if you have any sort of wisdom, which Esau doesn't, because wisdom is actually, you get wisdom by fearing the Lord, you wouldn't do these particular things, right? There's a way to actually treat certain trees, right? Especially certain trees that bear fruit, right? So let me go to that real quick. And I'll get a little bit about, the olives, right? And what olives were, are used for. One second. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 19, and it says, when thou shalt besiege a city a long time in making war against it to take it, thou shalt not destroy the trees thereof by forcing an axe against them. For thou mayest eat of them, and thou shalt not cut them down. For the tree of the field is man's life, to employ them in a siege. So essentially, this chapter essentially goes into, conduct, laws on warfare, right? So it says, verse 20, only the trees which thou knowest that they be not trees for meat, thou shalt not destroy and cut them down. Thou shalt build bulwarks against the city that maketh war with thee until it be subdued, right? So I want to get this in the the NLT real quick. Just bear with me. Let me just look for it. So verse 19, and here it says, Deuteronomy 20, it says, when you are attacking a town and the war drags on, you must not cut down the trees with your axes. You may eat the fruit, but do not cut down the trees. Are the trees your enemies that you should attack them? You may only cut trees that you know are not valuable for food. Use them to make the equipment you need to attack the enemy town until it falls, right? So this is a proper mindset of how to actually treat certain trees in the ecosystem, because Esau is shown time and time again, that he would essentially, he has long laundry list of receipts of the way he treats the land. Another example was the if you go into the Buffalo massacre, in order to try and get rid of the so-called northern tribes when they were over here in America. I believe the president at the time was named Andrew Jackson. His tactics was to essentially do the exact same thing they're doing to the Palestinians. Therefore, what his mindset was to essentially get rid, slaughter, and kill off the buffalo, because that's the way, we were using the buffalo. We were using it for food. You can use it, for clothing. You can use it. There was just so many different plethora of different ways they can use the buffalo, because the buffalo, it has different properties you can use it for, like medicinal properties, right? And this is what Esau did. He did the exact same thing, right? So he's shown time and time again that he is the wicked. They portray themselves as people who have, they care about the people, everybody's equal, but time and time again through their actions, it shows that they're far from, they're complete devils and destructive people, right? Secondly, the olives have many different purposes. So I just wanted to get a couple, what olives were used for. So the olives itself, they have its culinary purposes. So for food, right? It also says, aside from its edible fruit, the extracted oil was used for lamp fuel, personal grooming, cosmetics, soap, lubrication, medicine, right? Here also, let's see. What else does it say here? See, olives are very high in vitamin E and powerful antioxidants. Right? So, olive oil, you can extract oil from the olives to make olive oil. Right? It had anointing purposes, like there were certain kings like King David and King Solomon, they were anointed, right? You have anointing purposes that you use the oil from the olives for. You can also press it and essentially to get to make soap. You can press it to essentially for medicinal purposes, right? So having that understanding, it shows that there are many different ways to actually use the fruits of the field, right? But Esau is not somebody who actually has, he's not upright, right? He's essentially, he's a base man, right? This is the type of work that he does. He doesn't have the mindset to actually keep the Lord's ordinances, keep the Lord's statutes and commandments. It's not in him to do right, right? Let me just read this real quick. 1 second. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 3, verse 34, and it says, the point of 36. And it says, weigh therefore our wickedness in the balance, and theirs also that dwell the world, and so shall thy name nowhere be found but in Israel. Or, when was it that they which dwell upon the earth have not sinned in thy sight? Or what people have kept thy commandments? Thou shalt find that Israel had by name have kept thy precepts, but not the heathen, right? So it is not in the heathens, not interest per se, but it's not in their spirit to actually do right. They're the ones that have to actually be learning from us, the Israelites. Like for example, I remember having this conversation with my father years ago, and I remember I was driving him home, and I remember he was saying how he planted a bunch of trees, and he planted a bunch of trees in his around his house. And I don't remember exactly what he had said, but I remember some of the reasons included, like, to help with the pollution, dust, to cool down the place, right? So there's a lot of things that our people will do, as the scriptures say that the Gentiles that have not the law, they by nature would do things that are contained in the law, right? So our people would do a lot of things contained within their spirit because it's within them to actually do those things. It's programmed within us to actually perform those things, but not the heathen though. The heathen have to actually they have to learn from the Israelites, right? They have to come under us, right? When you go into Isaiah, the second chapter, they would have to go up to the ways and learn the ways of righteousness, because these heathens, their practices, their idols, their methods of worship are abominable and actually don't bring forth life, right? This is a kind of mindset, that their mindset only brings forth death, decay, destruction, and that's exactly what we see ran upon the planet Earth, because we have heathens ruling, essentially Esau, because the scriptures say that the earth is given into the hands of the wicked, right? This is the way you see the earth being ran, because you have somebody who's unrighteous ruling, mismanaging the resources, the natural resources of the planet, right? Let me go back to here, the article, and finish this off. So here it says, on Sunday, settlers also uprooted and broke 180 olive and citrus trees in the town of Azun, east of Kalkilia, in the northern West Bank. It says during that same month, the commission documented 415 settler attacks against Palestinians and their properties, ranging from armed assaults and vandalism and land bulldozing and tree uprooting and forced closures. Right, so let me just get this here. This is Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5, and it says, "Surely saith the Lord, Yahweh power, therefore, thus saith the Lord, Yahweh power, surely in the fire of my jealousy I have spoken against the residue of the heathen and against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, and to cast it out for a prey." So ever since they've been in that land, there's always been turmoil. As a matter of fact, I was looking this up yesterday, and there was a war that broke out. It was called the Arab-Israeli War, and it began May 15th, and they established themselves as a country, as a so-called state, I should say, in May 14th, 1948. And ever since they've been in that land, there's been strife, there's been turmoil, there's been destruction, there's been, war, there's always been a bunch of contention, right? And time again, like the point I was making earlier, they show themselves to not be the people. And this is just another example of how you see that they are not the people, because they don't actually have a reverence, a care for the Lord's ways, right? The scriptures say that his ways are higher than our ways, and that's what is needed upon the planet Earth. But they don't care about the Lord's ways. The Most High is really not in their thoughts. As a matter of fact, let me see. Hold on. Let's see if I could... Okay, just bear with me. Let me just look for this real quick. This is Psalms chapter 10, verse 4. It says, the wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after the Most High. Yahweh Bashem Shai. Yahweh Bashem Shai is not in all his thoughts. His ways are always grievous. His judgments are far above out of his sight. As for his enemies, he puffeth at them. Right? So this is the mindset of Esau. He doesn't have the mindset to actually keep the ordinances of how the earth is supposed to be governed. The scriptures say that the multitude of the wise is in the welfare of the world, right? And time again, Esau is somebody who's very knowledgeable, but he's not wise. Why? Because he does not fear the Lord, right? You see here. Okay, let me get this last one. Okay, let's go to Psalms 104. It says Psalms 104 verse 14, and it says, he causeth the grass to grow for the cattle, and the herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. The wine maketh glad the heart of man, and oil to make his face to shine, and bread which strengtheneth a man's heart. The trees of the Lord are full of sap, the cedars of Lebanon which he planted, right? So all these different things, Esau has contaminated all these different things, destroyed it, perverted it, made it sophisticated. And when you go into the word sophisticated in the etymology, it means to make something, it means to adulterate something, to make it, so it essentially becomes impure, right? Bread, water, salt, all the things, the principal things of a man's life that man is supposed to use for his sustenance, honey, all these different things, Esau has contaminated it, right? These things are supposed to be for our benefit so the earth can work for us, but Esau has essentially tampered with it, because it's not in him to do right. So it becomes satanic. It works against us, causing detriment to us. There was another point I was going to make. In regards to the olives, I'm sorry. When you think about the way the so-called Palestinians are using the olives, it's supposed to be essentially a method of oikos, of a drawing of establishing an economy, because you take those fruits and then you harvest them, and you might take them and exchange them for you might have somebody else, you might have a neighbor that's growing mangoes or growing apples, and you might do a trade. You might have like a bartering system, right? Because those fruits are still of value. They can be taken and harvested and produced into something else, right? But what does Esau do? He burns them down, right? So anyways, I'll leave the lesson there, but hopefully this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.